My husband caught me cheating, and my world unraveled in a way I never imagined possible. It began innocently enough, a passing glance, a shared laugh, and then a connection I didn't expect. His name was Liam, a co-worker who always seemed to understand me in ways my husband, James, no longer did. James and I had been married for 10 years. Over time, our relationship had settled into a comfortable, albeit monotonous, routine. The passion that once defined us had faded, replaced by discussions about bills, schedules, and the occasional disagreement about trivial things. I loved James, but I felt unseen and unheard, like a shadow lingering in the background of his life. Liam was different. He noticed the little things. When I changed my hairstyle, the way I hesitated before speaking, or the subtle shifts in my mood. Our conversations were intoxicating, and soon I found myself looking forward to work just to see him. It wasn't long before our friendship crossed a line. It happened one evening when James was out of town for a business trip. Liam and I met for drinks, and the night ended in his apartment. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming, but it didn't stop me from meeting him again. Each rendezvous felt like a reprieve from the emptiness I felt at home. I told myself it wasn't serious, just a temporary escape. Everything came crashing down one Saturday afternoon. James had been acting distant, and I assumed it was the usual stress from work. I didn't know he had started to suspect something. That day, I told him I was meeting a friend, but he followed me instead. I didn't see him when Liam and I walked into a cozy cafe. I didn't see him when we sat in a secluded corner, holding hands across the table. But I did see him when he suddenly appeared in front of us, his face pale and his eyes filled with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "What the hell is this, Emily?" he demanded, his voice low but shaking with fury. I froze, unable to form words. Liam stood up, mumbling an apology before slipping away, leaving me alone to face the storm. James didn't shout or cause a scene. Instead, he walked out, leaving me sitting there with tears streaming down my face. When I got home, his suitcase was by the door. He said he needed time to think and couldn't look at me. The pain in his voice was unbearable, and I realized then what I had risked for fleeting moments of excitement. The days that followed were agonizing. James moved into a hotel, and I was left to confront the mess I had created. I tried reaching out, apologizing, and begging for another chance, but he was guarded, his trust shattered. I'm still living with the consequences of my choices, trying to piece together what remains of our marriage. I don't know if James will ever forgive me, but I'm determined to face the aftermath of my betrayal. One day at a time as the days turned into weeks, the weight of James's absence bore down on me. The house felt colder, emptier without him. His laughter no longer filled the rooms, and the silence was a constant reminder of what I had jeopardized. I couldn't escape the memories of his face that day in the cafe, the pain etched so deeply in his eyes. I started therapy, both individually and for couples, though James was hesitant to attend. I needed to understand why I had let myself stray, why I had sought comfort in someone else instead of fighting for what we had. The sessions were grueling, forcing me to confront parts of myself I'd long ignored. My insecurities, my need for validation, and my failure to communicate my unhappiness. Eventually, James agreed to attend one session. He sat stiffly in the chair, arms crossed, his eyes avoiding mine. The therapist encouraged us to speak openly, to express what we were feeling. I confessed my loneliness, my misguided belief that our marriage had become stagnant, and how I had made the worst decision of my life by turning to someone else. My voice broke as I told him how deeply sorry I was. James's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and controlled, but it carried a depth of hurt that cut through me. "You didn't just betray me," he said. "You betrayed everything we built. You didn't even give me a chance to fix it." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. He was right. I had acted selfishly, without considering how my actions would destroy him, or us. The sessions continued sporadically. Some days, James would show up. Other days, he wouldn't. When he did, Our conversations were raw, filled with anger, sadness, and questions that didn't always have answers. It was a slow process, like picking up shards of glass and trying to fit them back together without cutting yourself. At home, I wrote him letters. I poured my heart into them, explaining my thoughts, my regrets, and my hopes for us. I left them on the counter, knowing he might not read them, but I wanted him to know I wasn't giving up. One evening, weeks after the cafe incident, James came home unexpectedly. He stood in the doorway, his suitcase in hand. My heart raced, unsure if this was the beginning of a new chapter or the end of everything. "I'm not ready to forgive you," he said, his voice steady but strained. "But I'm willing to try for us. I can't promise anything, Emily. This won't be easy." Relief and guilt washed over me simultaneously. I knew this was my second chance, but I also knew it wouldn't erase the pain I had caused. From that day forward, I committed myself to rebuilding our trust, to proving that I was worthy of his love. It's been months since James moved back in. Every day is a test of our resilience, our commitment to healing. Some days are better than others. We've started talking more, sharing little pieces of ourselves that have been lost over the years. There are still moments when I catch him looking at me, his eyes shadowed with doubt, and I know the road ahead is long. But I'm determined to make amends, to earn back the trust once shattered. For the first time in years, we're not just coexisting. As time passed, we're working, James and I gradually found a fragile rhythm in our lives. And while the scars of my betrayal may never fully fade, it couldn't be. I hold on to the hope that effort on both sides to move we can create something stronger. He still had moments where he withdrew, and I learned to give him space while reminding him I was there for him. We started incorporating little rituals into our lives. Every Sunday, we would sit down and talk uninterrupted about anything weighing on our minds. Sometimes, these conversations were light and filled with laughter, like they used to be. Other times, they were heavy, with James revisiting the pain I had caused, trying to make sense of it. I listened, no matter how much it hurt, knowing that my willingness to face his emotions was part of the price I had to pay for what I had done. Therapy became a cornerstone of our journey. Over time, James opened up about his own feelings of inadequacy in our marriage. He confessed that he had noticed my unhappiness but didn't know how to address it, so he buried himself in work instead. While it didn't justify my actions, it gave us both insight into the cracks that had formed between us long before Liam entered the picture. One of the hardest things for me to accept was that forgiveness couldn't be rushed. There were days when I felt we were making real progress, only for James to pull away after a memory or thought triggered his anger or hurt. On those days, I had to remind myself that this wasn't just about me. It was about giving James the time he needed to heal, even if that meant sitting with the discomfort of uncertainty. Liam was a name we rarely spoke. After our affair was exposed, I severed all ties with him, even switching jobs to ensure I wouldn't run into him again. That chapter of my life felt like a distant, shameful blur. My focus was on James, on us, and on rebuilding what I had nearly destroyed. Months turned into a year, and the progress we made began to feel tangible. We took small steps to reconnect. Date nights, weekend getaways, and even just sitting together in the evenings, holding hands while watching TV. These moments felt fragile at first, like a new foundation that could crumble if we weren't careful. But as time went on, they began to feel real. One evening, while cleaning out the attic, James found an old photo album from our early years together. We sat on the floor, flipping through pages filled with laughter, love, and memories of a simpler time. James paused on a picture of us at the beach, our faces glowing with joy. "I miss those days," he said quietly. "Me too," I replied, my voice trembling. "But maybe we can get back there, or somewhere even better." He looked at me for a long moment before nodding. "It'll take time, but I want to try." That night felt like a turning point. For the first time, there was a sense of hope, not just for survival, but for something more. I knew the scars of my betrayal would never completely disappear, but I also knew that scars didn't have to define us. They could be reminders of where we had been, but not where we were going. As we continue our journey, I've learned to embrace patience and vulnerability. Our marriage isn't perfect, and it never will be, but it's real. It's messy, complicated, and filled with challenges. Yet, it's also filled with love, a love that, despite everything, is still fighting to survive. And as long as James is willing to fight alongside me, I'll never stop fighting for you as James and I continued our journey. There were moments when I wondered if we could ever fully reclaim what we had lost. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily, and I understood that no matter how hard I worked, some wounds might never completely heal. Yet, each day we spent together, every shared moment of honesty and vulnerability, felt like a step toward something stronger, something more authentic than what we had before. One evening, several months after James returned home, he surprised me by suggesting we revisit one of our favorite spots, a quaint little inn by the lake where we had spent our honeymoon. I was hesitant at first, worried it might dredge up bittersweet memories that would only deepen the divide between us. But James was insistent, and I realized this was his way of trying to reconnect, to reclaim a piece of our past. The trip was awkward at first. We were both nervous, tiptoeing around each other as though afraid to disturb the delicate peace we had managed to build. But something shifted during our second night there. We sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars reflect on the calm surface of the lake. The silence between us felt different, not heavy with unresolved pain, but filled with unspoken understanding. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," James said, breaking the quiet. "It's not just about you. It's about me, too. Holding on to this anger, it's exhausting. And I don't want it to define us anymore." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached for his hand. "James, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right if you'll let me. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to be the person you can trust again." He squeezed my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You already are, Emily. You've shown me that. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward despite the hurt. And I think I'm ready to try." Those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest, though I knew they were just the beginning. Forgiveness, like healing, is a process, not a single moment, but a series of choices made over time. That night, as we lay in bed, James held me close for the first time in what felt like forever. His embrace was tentative, but it was there, and it gave me hope. Back home, life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. We laughed more, shared more, and even started dreaming again. Talking about trips we wanted to take, projects we wanted to tackle, and the kind of future we wanted to build. For the first time in years, it felt like we were a team, working together toward a common goal. There were still difficult moments. James would occasionally have flashbacks to the betrayal, and I would see the pain flicker in his eyes. When that happened, we would talk openly about it, no matter how uncomfortable it was. Those conversations weren't easy, but they were necessary. Each one felt like another piece of the wall between us being dismantled. One day, while cleaning out the garage, James found an old box filled with letters we had written to each other early in our relationship. We sat on the floor, reading them aloud, laughing at our younger selves and marveling at how far we had come. It reminded us both of the love that had brought us together in the first place, a love that, despite everything, still burned brightly beneath the scars. Now, years later, I can look back and see how far we've come. Our marriage isn't perfect. No marriage is, but it's real and it's ours. The affair is a part of our story, a painful chapter that taught us hard lessons about love, communication, and forgiveness. But it's not the whole story. We've built something new from the ashes of what was broken. It's not the same as before. It's deeper, more resilient, and forged through the fire of adversity. And as I look at James now, I see not just the man I betrayed, but the man who chose to stand beside me, to fight for us, even when it would have been easier to walk away. For that, I will always be grateful, and I will never stop fighting to honor the second chance he gave me.